Your life isn't broken. It's just out of balance. Between work, responsibility, and constant pressure, that feeling of peace can slowly disappear. This audiobook explains the art of life balance, and it will show you how to restore calm, clarity, and control, all without escaping your real life. So listen carefully. Because balance is not something you find, it's something you create. Part 1, Act 1, The Boston Bride and the Golden City. Welcome to San Francisco in the 1860s, a world filled with sand dunes, wooden sidewalks, and a high society that still carries the air of the Old South. The city's social dictator, a woman named Mrs. Hunt McLean, is hosting a housewarming party on Rincon Hill. But the real guest of honor is a mystery, the new bride of the city's favorite doctor, Howard Talbot. The local aristocrats are already skeptical. You see, Dr. Talbot is a Southerner, but he has committed what they consider an outrage by marrying a woman from Boston, which they view as the plebeian North, meaning it's common or lower class. They're expecting a plain, angular woman who eats codfish and pie for breakfast. But when Madeline Talbot enters the room, everyone gasps. She is tall, supple, and dressed in French velvet, notably without the monstrous hoop skirts that were popular with the local women. She is what's known as a base bleue, which is an old French term for a blue stocking, or a highly intellectual woman. So what is a base bleue? Imagine a woman today who would rather stay home and debate the philosophy of a complex poem than go to a celebrity gala. That is Madeline. However, her husband, Dr. Talbot, doesn't seem to value her mind at all. He tells his friends that men don't find companionship in women and dismisses her interest in books as just a symptom of nerves. He spends his nights at the Union Club playing poker and drinking whiskey, which leaves Madeline all alone in their hotel suite. Madeline tries her best to be the perfect wife, even hiding her beloved books in cases down in the hotel cellar, but that intellectual fire inside her is only sleeping, not extinguished. Part 2, Act 2, The Villain and the Visionary. As the summer fogs roll into the city, Madeline's loneliness only grows deeper. While she's out walking along the Cliff House Road, she runs into a man known as the Union Club gossip, Ben Travers. Travers is described as a Cyprian chaser, which means he's a man who spends his time with the demi-monde. The demi-monde is the half-world of social outcasts and mistresses. To give you a modern idea of the demi-monde, think of the shady side of Hollywood, people who are wealthy and famous but wouldn't get an invitation to a traditional, high-class family dinner. Travers offers Madeline a ride, but once they're inside the dark carriage, he turns into a satyr, trying to force a kiss on her. In a moment of pure courage, Madeline uses her supple strength to fight him off, eventually managing to throw the man right out of the moving carriage and into a ditch. Soon after this awful encounter, a new person enters her life, Langdon Masters. He's a brilliant journalist from Virginia with eyes like steel. Unlike her husband, Masters immediately recognizes Madeline's brilliance. At a dinner party, he notices her staring longingly at his library of books. He begins to lend her volumes of Browning and Swinburne. Their friendship is built on what the story calls mental sympathy, a deep connection of minds that Madeline has never experienced with her husband. They start meeting every afternoon, tucked away from the prying eyes of society, as Masters reads poetry to her while a log fire blazes in her parlor. Part 3, Act 3, The Toll of the Bell. The secret intellectual oasis that Madeline and Masters have built for themselves is soon threatened. A woman named Mrs. Abbott, described as having unquenchable virtue and 3 chins, barges into Madeline's parlor one day and finds her alone with Masters. The story says the bell in her depths begins to toll. Madeline knows this beautiful dream is coming to an end. The scandal explodes on New Year's Day. Ben Travers, still seeking revenge for being thrown out of the carriage, publicly insults Madeline at a reception. He implies that she is Masters' mistress and that he has the key to her rooms. The shock of it all causes Madeline to faint. And even though her friends try to hush it up, the gossip spreads like water out of a sieve. Dr. Talbot, finally waking up to his wife's unhappiness, confronts Masters. In a dramatic showdown, the doctor doesn't reach for a gun, but for a more lethal weapon, Masters' honor. He tells Masters that if he truly loves Madeline, he must leave San Francisco forever to save her reputation. Masters is a man of noblesse oblige, which is the idea that high-ranking people have a duty to act honorably. For an example of noblesse oblige, it's like a famous hero who gives up his greatest treasure, because it's the only way to save the village. So to save Madeline from becoming a pariah, which is a social outcast, Masters agrees. He abandons his dreams of starting a newspaper and flees to New York, leaving Madeline in a state of silent, frozen despair. Part 4, Act 4, The Descent into Darkness. With Masters gone, Madeline's entire world turns gray. Her husband tries to win her back with jewels and flowers, but she treats him like a complete stranger. The physical pain of her loss starts to show up as a hacking cough, and the doctor prescribes stimulants for her: port wine, sherry, and bourbon. Then Madeline discovers a terrifying truth from a young editor named Ralph Holt. He tells her that Masters has gone to the devil in New York. Unable to cope with losing his love and his career, the brilliant journalist is now drinking himself to death in the gutters of Nassau Street. In a shocking move of ratiocination, which is the process of logical reasoning, Madeline decides that if she cannot be with him in life, she will be with him in his disgrace. So what is ratiocination in this context? This is like a detective putting clues together to reach a conclusion, except in this case, Madeline is using logic to justify her own self-destruction. She begins to drink heavily, hiding gin and whiskey from her husband. She is eventually found, drunk as they make 'em, on a ferry boat by her old social friends, which publicly seals her fate as an outcast. She tells her husband she doesn't care about her pride. She only wants to die in the same gutter as Langdon. Part 5, Act 5, The Search in the Slums. Now a divorced woman and a social ghost, Madeline follows Masters to New York. She gets the help of Ralph Holt and a reporter named Tom Lacey to find him. They track him to the 5 Points, a place that Holt describes simply as hell. To paint a picture of the 5 Points, imagine the most dangerous, crowded, and filthy alleyway in a city, a place where even the police are afraid to go. That was the 5 Points in the 1800s. The group enters a groggery, which is a low-class bar, and the air is thick with the miasma of tobacco and filth. What's a miasma? Think of a heavy, stinking fog that makes it hard to breathe or even see clearly. Inside, she finds Masters. He is unrecognizable, with a red face, scowling, and sitting with a drab, which was a term for a woman of the streets. When he sees Madeline, he thinks she is a ghost or a hallucination from delirium tremens, also known as the DTs, which are violent shakes and visions caused by heavy drinking. Delirium tremens is like being in a waking nightmare where your body shakes uncontrollably, and you see things that aren't really there. Masters screams at her to leave, but Madeline is no longer the timid Boston bride. She literally fights the other woman, throwing her across a table, and tells Masters, "He's mine and I'll have him." She then forces him out of the slum and takes him to a lodging she has prepared on Bleecker Street. Part 6, Act 6, Sleeping Fires Awakened. The final road to recovery is a long one. For 2 months, Madeline and Holt taper, Masters off the alcohol, nursing him back to health in a room that she has lined with his own beloved books. When Masters finally awakens with a clear mind, he is horrified to learn that Madeline sacrificed her entire reputation and social standing just to find him in the gutter. He realizes that she is a great woman and a great lover. The story then ends years later, in 1878. Back in San Francisco, the old socialites are gathered for a luncheon. Mrs. McLean has just returned from Europe and shares the piece de resistance of her news, which means the best part. She met the Masters in Berlin. Langdon Masters is now a world-famous journalist, covering the Congress of Berlin and eclipsing the best writers in Europe. And Madeline is right there at his side, more beautiful than ever, dressed in azure blue gauze and diamond stars. The social dictators of San Francisco are horrified that 2 sinners could find such happiness and success. They vow that people like them would never be allowed back into their castellated harbor of society. But as the novel closes, it is clear that Madeline and Langdon don't care at all. They have moved beyond the small-minded, sleeping fires of San Francisco and into a life of true intellectual and romantic fire. Part 7, Act 7. Madeline, now trapped in a cycle of despair, ventures into a crowded Montgomery Street restaurant all by herself. This was a scandalous act for a lady of her hautun, which means high fashion or high social status. She is searching for Ralph Holt, a young editor who was close to Langdon Masters. When she finds him, he is brutal. He tells her that Masters has gone to the devil in New York because of her. The news hits her like a physical blow, and she nearly faints in the smoke-filled room. Holt takes her into a carriage, where he explains that Masters is scientifically drinking himself to death because he lost his career and his love in one fell swoop. In a moment of ratiocination, that fancy word for the process of logical reasoning, Madeline decides that if she cannot be with Masters in his glory, she will share his disgrace. She tells a horrified Holt that she will follow Masters' example and drink herself to death. To put this idea of ratiocination in another way, it is like a person who, after losing everything, sits down and logically convinces themselves that the only sane thing left to do is go insane. Part 8, Act 8. Doctor. Talbot returns from dealing with a smallpox epidemic to find Madeline in a stupor. He is horrified, both as a doctor and as a husband, to find her brain congested by alcohol. He tries to taper her off the drink by giving her smaller and smaller doses, but she has become cunning. To understand tapering, it's like a smoker trying to quit by having one fewer cigarette each day until they finally reach zero. Madeline picklocks the liquor cupboard with a hairpin and bribes a chambermaid to buy her gin. When the doctor confronts her, begging her to return to society, she coldly admits that she is pining for Masters and that she is deliberately trying to kill herself. The doctor, who is usually so jovial, is left sobbing in despair. Part 9, Act 9, The Oakland Abduction. San Francisco society finally learns the truth through servant gossip. The powerful Mrs. McLean and Mrs. Abbott are stunned. They cannot believe a woman of Madeline's breeding has fallen so low. They decide to throw her a plank. This means they're going to try to rescue her. It's like a rescue boat, throwing a piece of wood to someone drowning in the middle of the ocean. Sally Abbott, Madeline's friend, takes her to a home in Oakland, effectively becoming her jailer. Madeline pretends to recover, playing games and singing, but she is secretly plotting her escape. One night, she steals away to a restaurant called Old Blazes, where she pawns her gold bracelet and pearl brooch for 2 gold pieces and a bottle of bourbon. Part 10, Act 10, The Public Disgrace. The escape ends in a complete nightmare. Madeline is found unconscious on a ferry boat by her old society friends, including Colonel Belmont and Alexander Groom. She is drunk as they make 'em, and the scandal is now completely public. Doctor. Talbot tells her that she is an outcast, a pariah, and he threatens to put her in a home for inebriates. To understand what a pariah is, think of a celebrity who does something so terrible that every single friend, fan, and company turns their back on them forever. Madeline refuses to return to him. She obtains money from her father in Boston and moves into a lonely rooming house on the plaza. She begins to haunt the night hells of San Francisco, sitting in the shadows of the underworld just to feel closer to the disgrace that Masters is enduring. Part 11, Act 11, The Path to Freedom. Ralph Holt finds her in a disreputable basement restaurant in Chinatown. He tells her more about Masters, that he was in a New York hospital after a fight with a police officer. Soon, Mr. McLean visits Madeline with a message. The doctor is divorcing her on the grounds of desertion. Instead of being crushed, Madeline is relieved. She tells Holt she is leaving California forever to find Masters. Holt warns her that she might find him in the gutter, but she replies with fierce determination that he's hers and she'll have him. Part 12, The Search in New York. Madeline arrives in New York and enlists Tom Lacey, another journalist, to help her. She moves into a lodging in Bleecker Street, a Latin quarter where no questions are asked, and prepares a room for Masters, filling it with his favorite books. Meanwhile, Masters is living in 5 Points, the most dangerous slum in New York. He lives in a garret with a Cyprian, which is a term for a woman of the streets, and spends his nights in groggeries, which were low-end, filthy bars. He has completely renounced his self-respect, using his brilliant mind only to tell drunken, ironic stories to thieves and murderers. Part 13, The Battle in the Slum. Holt and Lacey take Madeline into the heart of 5 Points. The miasma, which is a heavy, stinking fog of filth, and the sight of naked, starving children nearly overcome her. They find Masters in a corner of a bar, his face a dark, uniform red, looking years older and completely broken. When he sees her, he thinks she is a ghost or a hallucination from delirium tremens, which you might know as the DTs, or the violent shakes and visions from alcohol withdrawal. His companion attacks Madeline, but Madeline, hardened by her own time in the underworld, twists the woman's arm and flings her aside. She tells Masters, "I've fought for you on your own field and won you." Part 14, The Final Awakening. Masters is taken back to Bleecker Street, where he undergoes a grueling 2-month recovery. When he finally wakes with a clear mind, he is shocked to see his books on the wall. Holt tells him the truth, that Madeline deliberately destroyed her own reputation and became a drunkard just to share his fate and find him. Masters realizes she is a great woman and a great lover. They reunite, and the sleeping fires of their lives are finally rekindled into a steady flame. The story ends years later in Berlin. The San Francisco ladies, still gossiping, learn that Masters is now a world-famous journalist, and Madeline is a stunning figure in European society. Though the social dictators vow never to let them back into their castellated harbor of San Francisco, the Masters have found a happiness that the narrow-minded society can never understand. Part 15, The Social Dictator and the Mysterious Bride. Welcome to San Francisco in the 1860s, a city of extreme contrasts where goats wander through the rocky gulches of Nob Hill while the elite hide away in the stately mansions of Rincon Hill. In this era, the city is a stronghold for Southerners who view themselves as aristocrats and consider anyone from the North to be plebeian. A plebeian is basically a commoner or someone who doesn't belong to the inner circle of high society. The city's social dictator, Mrs. Hunt McLean, is hosting a housewarming, but the real focus is a scandal. The city's favorite doctor, Howard Talbot, has committed the outrage of marrying a woman from Boston, Madeline Chilton. The local ladies expect a plain and angular woman raised on codfish and pie for breakfast. However, when Madeline Talbot enters, the room gasps in amazement. She is tall, supple, and dressed in French velvet, without the monstrous hoop skirts or crinolines favored by the locals. She is refined, high-toned, and immediately captures the hearts of the very people who intended to shun her. Part 16, The Perfect Wife and the Hidden Mind. Madeline is an instant success, but behind the sparkling shallows of her social life lies a deep loneliness. She is profoundly in love with her husband, but Dr. Talbot treats her like a fascinating little girl, rather than an intellectual equal. He spends his nights at the Union Club playing poker and drinking whiskey, leaving Madeline alone in their hotel suite. Howard fears his wife is a baz bleu. A baz bleu is an old French term for a blue stocking, or a woman with what were considered unfeminine intellectual interests, someone who would rather read philosophy than gossip at a tea party. To please him, Madeline hides her true self. She executes a pas seul, which is a solo dance, in her parlor to show her joy, but her husband dismisses her mind, claiming that men don't find companionship in women. He orders her to keep her books packed away in the hotel cellar, fearing that serious reading will addle her brains or ruin her sparkling shallows. For a time, Madeline's intellectual fire remains a sleeping fire, buried under the routine of dinners and luncheons. Part 17, The Satyr in the Shadows. As the summer fogs and screaming winds roll into San Francisco, Madeline's isolation grows. Seeking escape, she goes for a long walk toward the Cliff House Road, a place where the gay world of the demimonde flaunts their reckless lifestyles. The demimonde was the half-world of people who have wealth but lack social respectability. You can think of them as shady celebrities who aren't invited to traditional family galas. There, she encounters old Ben Travers, the Union Club gossip, who offers her a ride home in a dark carriage. Inside the hack, Travers turns into a satyr. In this context, a satyr refers to a lecherous man who lacks moral restraint. Travers tries to force a kiss upon her, but Madeline reveals her supple strength. She fights him off with a dexterous twisting motion, and literally throws the man out of the moving carriage and into a ditch. Though she escapes, she realizes she has made a venomous enemy in the city's greatest gossip. Part 18. The Arrival of the Steel-Eyed Visionary. A smallpox epidemic strikes the city, and while Dr. Talbot is busy with patients, Madeline is sent to the country. During this time, a new figure arrives in San Francisco, Langdon Masters. He is a brilliant Virginian journalist with eyes like steel and a merciless irony. Masters is a man of noblesse oblige. This is the idea that people of high rank or talent have a social duty to act with honor and generosity. Unlike the other men in society, Masters is a practical visionary who cares more for intellectual magazines than poker. When he meets Madeline at a dinner party, he doesn't just see a beautiful woman, he sees a mind as sharp as his own. He notices her staring longingly at his wall of books, a library that stretches to the ceiling. In that moment, a silent connection is formed, a mental sympathy that Madeline has never known with her husband. Part 19. Awakening the Sleeping Fires. The sleeping fires of Madeline's mind are finally fanned into a flame. Masters recognizes her unfeminine love of books and offers to lend her his library. He sends her volumes of Browning, Swinburne, and Shelley, poets who explore the depths of human passion and thought. As she reads, her emotional nature begins to vibrate with a new energy. She feels a mental growth and expansion that intoxicates her. She and Masters begin to meet in the afternoons, tucked away in her parlor while a log fire blazes. He reads poetry to her, including The Statue and the Bust, a poem about hesitant lovers. While Madeline insists her love for her husband is a domestic love, and that she would never betray Howard, the intellectual intimacy she shares with Masters is far more dangerous. They are standing on an oasis of their own, unaware that the social dictators of San Francisco are already beginning to watch them with unquenchable virtue and suspicious eyes. Part 20. The Forbidden Oasis. Imagine a room that feels like a bubble, protected from the screaming winds and dusty streets of 1860s San Francisco. Inside Madeline's parlor, the air is thick with the scent of old books and the heat of a log fire. Here, Langdon Masters spends every afternoon, assuming the role of an unofficial teacher to a woman who is starving for mental stimulation. They read Maud and Pippa Passes, poems that explore the depths of human emotion, while the rest of high society is out of town for the summer. Madeline is convinced she is safe. She calls this a mental flirtation, a connection of minds that doesn't count as a betrayal of her marriage vows. She is a delectable Puritan, a woman so bound by her religious and social creed that she cannot imagine herself ever actually breaking her promises. Think of someone who follows every single rule to the letter, believing that as long as they don't touch or kiss, their heart can wander wherever it wants without sinning. But Masters, a man of the world, knows better. He sees the lightning on the horizon. He realizes that a woman's repressed excitement is a dangerous thing that cannot stay hidden forever. While Dr. Talbot is busy treating a smallpox epidemic, he remains blissfully ignorant, even taking Masters shooting in the marshes, never suspecting that his wife's cure for her loneliness is far more addictive than any medicine he could prescribe. However, the social dictators are returning to the city, and they are beginning to wonder, why has Madeline Talbot's broken spring suddenly been mended? Part 21. The Shadow of the Sword. The bubble finally burst when Mrs. Abbott, a woman of unquenchable virtue and 3 chins, decides to take the bull by the horns. She barges into Madeline's parlor without being announced and finds Masters and Madeline sitting, as cozy as 2 bugs in a rug. She notices the table piled high with borrowed books and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, leap to the conclusion that San Francisco has been waiting for. A scandal is brewing. Mrs. Abbott delivers a warning disguised as a compliment, tweaking Madeline's ear and telling her not to stuff her pretty little head with too much knowledge. As she leaves, Madeline hears a bell in her depths begin to toll a funeral note. It's going to end. In the middle of this tension, a new door opens. Doctor Talbot bursts in with great news. A group of wealthy citizens has raised $100,000 to start a new, world-class newspaper, and they want Masters to lead it. For a moment, Masters is a practical visionary, seeing his dreams of power and influence finally coming true. A practical visionary is like a dreamer who isn't just head in the clouds, but someone who has the money and the plan to actually build the castle they've been dreaming about. But this success is a double-edged sword. To keep his reputation clean for the newspaper, and to save Madeline from being a pariah or a social outcast, their afternoon meetings must become a game of sandwiching and schemes. They are now living in a fool's paradise, trying to trick a society that is already watching them through antennae of gossip. Part 22, The Glass Shatters. The final explosion happens on New Year's Day, a time of high pomp and eggnog in San Francisco. Madeline is helping the city's social leader, Mrs. McLean, serve drinks to a crowd of elegantly dressed men. Ben Travers, the man Madeline once threw out of a carriage, enters. He is drunk and looking for revenge. In front of the city's most powerful men, Travers sneers and asks Madeline if Masters left her the key to his rooms before he went to Richmond. He implies that Madeline is not just a student of poetry, but Masters' mistress. The shock is so violent that Madeline drops her glass and faints dead away. Though the gentlemen try to hush it up and even threaten to horsewhip Travers, the secret is like water out of a sieve. Within 3 days, everyone in the city knows. The ladies of San Francisco, who once took Madeline to their hearts, now watch her with mocking, sympathetic, and encouraging eyes, waiting for the final fall. Madeline tries to act with cold pride, but she is living on the edge. She is a woman trapped on the rack between her immutable principles, which come from her strict religious upbringing and a love that has become a furnace. To be clear, when we say immutable principles, we mean rules that you believe can never, ever be changed, like a stone wall that you've built your entire life around. Part 23, The Mission Dolors and the Breaking Point. The tragedy reaches its peak at the Mission Dolors, which is an old, crumbling church surrounded by sand and the graves of the Spanish grandees. Masters and Madeline seek shelter there in the twilight gloom of the church, hoping to rest from their long walks. Surrounded by the silence of the past, their guard finally fails. Masters takes her in his arms and kisses her, and for a moment, they find what is described as unmortal bliss. But the scourge of conscience follows immediately. Madeline believes she is now a bad, wicked woman. As they leave the church, who should pass them but Ben Travers, once again, watching them with expanded eyes. He carries this final piece of evidence straight to the social dictators. And with that, the social structure finally moves to crush them. Mrs. McLean warns Dr. Talbot that he must act before there is an abominable scandal. In a heartbreaking confrontation, the doctor, who is usually jovial and cynical, appears sallow and drawn, looking older by the minute. He admits he has been a failure as a husband, but he is determined to save Madeline's reputation in the only way possible. He gives Masters an ultimatum: leave San Francisco forever, or watch Madeline be dragged through the mud and ranked with the harlots of DuPont Street. Masters, bound by noblesse oblige, which is his duty as a gentleman, agrees to leave. He gives up his newspaper, his career, and his heart to save her from ruin. Madeline is left in a vacuum, waiting for a future that has been drained of all its light. Part 24, The Fool's Paradise. By the summer, San Francisco is empty, but Madeline remains in the city with Langdon Masters. They have entered what's called a fool's paradise, a state of mind where they believe they are safe from consequences because their connection is purely intellectual. Think of a fool's paradise like this. It's like two people sitting in a beautiful garden while a forest fire burns just outside the walls, and they're convinced the smoke won't reach them simply because they aren't looking at it. Masters spends every afternoon in Madeline's parlor, acting as her mentor. He reads her the passionate poetry of Tennyson and Browning, but they both pretend it is merely a mental flirtation. Madeline considers herself a delectable Puritan, a woman so strictly bound by her religious creed and marriage vows that she believes she is immune to actual sin. For a delectable Puritan, you can think of someone who follows every social rule so perfectly that they believe their inner thoughts can't possibly get them into trouble, as long as they stay proper on the outside. However, the social dictators are watching. When the elite return to the city, they notice Madeline is no longer the wilted flower she once was. She has a repressed excitement about her that makes the older women, like the eagle-eyed Mrs. Abbott, highly suspicious. They begin to wonder if there is a man behind this miraculous recovery. Part 25, The Bell in the Depths. The bubble of their secret world finally bursts when Mrs. Abbott, the self-appointed guardian of San Francisco's virtue, decides to take the bull by the horns. She barges into Madeline's parlor unannounced and finds her sitting, cozy as two bugs in a rug, with Masters. Mrs. Abbott delivers a stinging warning disguised as a compliment, telling Madeline not to stuff her pretty little head with too much knowledge. As she leaves, Madeline hears a bell in her depths begin to toll a funeral note. She knows their beautiful afternoons are over. In a moment of irony, Dr. Talbot enters with great news. He has helped raise $100,000 to start a world-class newspaper, and he wants Masters to lead it. Masters is described as a practical visionary, a dreamer who now has the literal capital, the money, to build his dream. Think of a practical visionary, like an architect who has been drawing beautiful buildings for years, and is suddenly handed the keys to a construction company and a massive plot of land. While Masters is thrilled by his success, Madeline is filled with dread. To protect her reputation and his new career, they must now engage in finesse, which is the art of using subtle, clever schemes to hide their friendship from a society that is already whispering. Part 26, The Glass Shatters. The final explosion occurs on New Year's Day, a time of high ceremony and eggnog. Madeline is assisting at a massive reception when her old enemy, the gossip Ben Travers, saunters up. Travers is drunk and looking for revenge for the night she threw him out of a carriage. In front of the city's most powerful men, he loudly asks Madeline if Masters left her the key to his rooms before he went away. The insult implies she is Masters' mistress. The shock is so violent that Madeline drops her glass and faints dead away. Though the men try to hush it up, the scandal is like water out of a sieve. Within 3 days, the whole town knows. Madeline is trapped on the rack, that metaphor for extreme mental torture, as she tries to maintain her cold pride, while society watches her every move with mocking eyes. Masters tries to stay away, but his presence in the city is a constant reminder of the scandal. He finds himself frustrated because his newspaper plans are delayed by a lack of ready cash, making him a fatalist who believes the universe is working against him. Part 27, The Ghost of Mission Dolors. Desperate to escape the prying eyes of the city, Madeline and Masters take a long walk to the Mission Dolors, that same old, crumbling church surrounded by sand dunes and the graves of the past. In the silence and twilight gloom of the church, their self-control finally breaks. Masters takes her in his arms, and they share a kiss that Madeline describes as unmortal bliss. But the moment of ecstasy is followed by a scourge of conscience. Madeline believes she is now a bad, wicked woman because she has betrayed her husband in her heart. As they leave the church, the fates strike again. Ben Travers passes them on horseback and sees Madeline's revealing face. He carries this final piece of evidence straight to Mrs. Abbott. The social structure finally moves to crush them. Mrs. Abbott writes a letter to the city's social leader, Mrs. McLean, who realizes that if she doesn't act, Madeline will be a pariah, a social outcast treated like a leper. To understand what a pariah is, Imagine a famous person who does something so scandalous that every friend they have stops calling, every club cancels their membership, and no one will even sit near them in public. To save her friend from this fate, Mrs. McLean goes to Dr. Talbot and tells him the truth, setting the stage for a final, heartbreaking confrontation.